discuss with you guys as a way of learning would be to actually do a kind of 2 to 5 page summary of the area that you discussed, right? Now, one of the ways to do this is to take the video recording, right, of the discussion, because we've got the recordings of your discussions, along with the paper you read, and just kind of write a summary document, right? Now, this helps me, so when I look through that to decide your exam questions, I can see that you've got a general understanding, right? If you don't do one of those, I have to make up myself what I think you might know, and therefore ask you potentially much harder questions in areas you didn't actually read about, right? So if you write this kind of 2 to 5 page overview of your area, it indicates like the area with which you feel and the additional reading you did or the additional understanding of that area, right? Now, it's not compulsory because it's not written in the assessment, so I can't assess you on it, right? Because it's how it works. But it would make it easier in the oral exam to ask you questions that are in the field and things that you actually read and studied. Okay, so do you understand what I mean by that? Right, because if I ask you about games for like brain training or something, right, there are a lot of potential things I could ask about, right? And if you tell me nothing about what any additional reading you did or any of your understanding, then I have to kind of pick some stuff and ask you about that. If you give me this document, I'll go, okay, so that's the area you read. I'll make sure I ask questions in those areas.
That paper would only be on our subject, not the entire course?
That would only be on your subject area, right? Either bits that you are reading, that you are presenting and you read more about and focused on, right? Now, that could also be that you are planning to use that in your integration project, right? So it's also quite possible for you to decide, hey, for the integration project, I want to use this area, do this games thing. And, then the overlap is perfectly reasonable, right? And then you've got a secondary reason to read more and write more about it, right? So I'm fine if you do that, right? So if you kind of reuse that time in that way, because you'll still be assessed in the oral exam as an oral exam, right? So do you understand what I want by that? And I can clarify it more if you guys are comfortable with that as an option. Again, it's optional, you don't have to do it. Yep.
Do you also get questions from other subjects?
You will also get questions from the other papers. So you will have to, for the exam, kind of scan over and remember the general principles from the other papers. I won't ask you very specific questions like, in this paper, 3 out of 5 of the participants said what about engagement? I don't remember what they. So yeah, no, I'm not going to ask you things like what percentage of players completed the game in this thing, right? Yes, I know that figure was in there somewhere, but I'm not going to ask you on things that aren't your area. Certainly, ask you too detailed, specific questions, but you should understand the discussion and. Potentially, I could ask you what are some of the limitations of. So, for example, if we're doing brain training games, right? What are some of the limitations of, as discussed in the papers, on training working memory? Right. So you should be able to answer those sorts of questions, having read these papers, right? That they discuss some of the limitations, and so yeah, for people who are answering generally across the areas, it'll be discussion questions on your particular area. I will dig deeper, right? And by doing this kind of summary yourself and giving it to me, I understand what additional stuff you've read and what's your understanding, and I can give you feedback on that to say, well, actually, I think you should read a bit more here, right? To broaden your understanding of that field, because hopefully you've picked a topic that you're at least vaguely interested in. Okay. Or I picked a topic for you that I hope you will be interested in. Okay, so today we have, I've got to go to the site and get the day's list of people who are presenting. So, Magnus and Nikita. Is that right, Nikita? Is that how I say it?
Yeah.
Okay. So Magnus and Nikita, who's going to go first? Should we flip a coin? Okay, so the two papers we're covering today are one on Portal versus Lumosity, and the other is on the effects of gamifying an in-back training system. Okay, so shall we start with the more general Portal to Luminosity one? Right, so Magnus, if you could come up and tell us something about Portal. Have you ever played Portal?
Yes.
Oh, good. I had kind of assumed you might have played Portal. Have you ever looked at Lumosity before?
No.
Right. Did you have a look at Lumosity?
I didn't actually try it.
So you have a link. Who had a look at Lumosity? Anyone have a look at
gameplay on YouTube?
Oh, you did you looked at the gameplay on YouTube. I don't pay for Lumosity, so I have just a normal account rather than a paid for account. It is surprisingly like straight cognitive test that you might get in an IQ test with points. Right, so it's very much an IQ test with points, which is, yeah, okay. You know, it's okay, but I'm not sure if it's the best way of doing it. But that's some extent what. Okay. Right. So again, we're going to have, and I think what we'll do is we'll probably make you positive for this one, right? Okay. Yep. And you can be the opponent, right? We'll make you on the negative side for this paper, and you can say why this is shit. Okay, so we're recording, we're live, all good. I said shit live on. I'll just claim I'm from Northern Norway. No one. Okay, so thanks.
Okay, so I'll present the paper, The Power of Play, the effects of Portal 2, and Lumosity on cognitive and non-cognitive skills. So the goal of this paper is finding the effects that Portal 2 and oops, that's not good.
Yeah, it's back.
It's back.
Yeah.
Maybe some cabling issue.
Some issues with this.
And could you also move the table a little bit forward so you are in video? Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Finding the effects of that Portal 2 and Lumosity has on some cognitive and non-cognitive skills. It's also the title says. So for cognitive skills, they look at two different skills. They look at problem solving and spatial skills. And for non-cognitive, they look at the persistence. So the paper starts by introducing some background motivation for the project. They discuss that there are now many people playing games, often daily, and that previous research has shown that games can actually increase various skills like visual spatial skills, attention, and persistence. And they also refer to some other papers suggesting that some previous studies have used some bad methodologies for doing these studies, and that they should compare with a similarly active control group when they just do some experiments like this. And this control group should have the same expectations as the experimental group. For this project, they used Portal 2, a pure entertainment game, and Lumosity, which is a game designed specifically for brain training. And they used this Lumosity game as the control group or a conservative control condition. And this Lumosity game should generate some expectation of gaining skills, since it's advertised as improving your skills. Which they claim that should be better than using any casual game like Tetris, which is often used in other studies. So for problem solving, they divide into 4 different categories: rule application, problem decomposition, flexibility, and resource management. And they only look at rule application and flexibility. So for real application, they use the Raven's progressive matrices to test the participants, which you can see on the right side there, where you have to find the missing piece based on the patterns. And for flexibility, they use the insight test and a remote association test, or RAT for short. And for spatial skills, they divided into 3 categories: figural, vista, and environmental. 3 different scales. So for figural, they use the mental rotation task, which you see on the bottom right there. And for vista, they use spatial orientation test on the top right. And for environmental, they use their own tool that they developed with Unity, which is a first-person game or simulation where people have to navigate through a world. And they claim that Portal 2 may actually improve these spatial skills because it is a 3D navigation game. So for persistence, they also use their own tool, picture comparison tool, where participants have to compare 2 pictures and find the difference between them, and they have to select the difference. What's interesting here is that the last comparisons are actually unsolvable. So what they measure is how long time participants use to try to figure out the unsolvable comparisons before they give up and jump to the next. They only use this for post testing because it is likely that the participants will discover the trick behind this and that they're actually unsolvable, and thus the measurement will be invalid. So for pre-testing, they use a self-report where participants answer 8 questions about their persistence. All the other measurements mentioned earlier are used both in pre-test and post-test. So they also measure the game performance in both of the games. In Portal 2, they count the number of levels, the average number of portal shots, and the average time to complete the level. While in Lumosity, they just use the brain power index, which the game generates itself based on the player performance. They also measure the enjoyment that the players have in each of the games with a self-reported response. So they define 4 hypotheses. The first one is that Portal 2 is actually better than Lumosity, or equal or better than Lumosity, in all of the 3 mentioned skills. And the second one is that both of the games improve pre-test to post-test gains in problem solving. The third one is that Portal 2 improves all of the spatial skills, while Lumosity will only improve figural and vista, so the smaller scale skills. And the fourth is that the in-game performance in both of the games will predict post-test scores in problem and spatial skills, problem solving and spatial skills. So for the experiment, they recruit some undergraduates via flyers in the university, and in the end, they have 77 of them completing the experiment. They divide the participants into 2 groups randomly, one for playing Portal 2 and one for playing Lumosity. Each of the groups go through a pre-test first, the same pre-test. Then they have 8 hours of gameplay in each of their respective games, and then they do a post-test after those 8 hours. So the results to get is that actually Portal 2 is better than the Musty in all of the skills. The first hypothesis is supported by results. And the second is that there is no significant problem-solving improvement. So the second hypothesis was not supported. Portal 2 did improve figural and environmental skill, so not all of the special skills, but so hypothesis 3 was partly supported. And game performance did predict some of the post-test measures, not all of them. So the fourth hypothesis was also partially supported. So in the discussion, they say that because of the way they did the experiment with using the Musty as a conservative control condition, the possible placebo effects of expectations are better controlled in this experiment. And they have evidence that Portal 2 actually improves small and large spatial skills, that engaging gameplay can make players try harder on subsequent tasks, which is they have better persistence, and that improved performance in a game can yield improved cognitive skills. Portal 2 can improve persistence, which is a non-cognitive skills. And in the end, they said that we should be cautious about generalizing the results because they have a relatively small sample size, and also their measurements have low reliability. And they say that it's probably because of the short tests. So for future work, they suggest having a larger sample, a different population, and more items per test to increase the reliability, and maybe a more informal setting than what they have in this experiment. Yeah, so that's it.
Okay. Thank you. Right. Okay. Do we clap? Do you guys like being clapped? Okay. So now we have the questions. Oh, my internet seems to have dropped. And we have the opponent. So can you stand and be the opponent on standing over there? And you can spin your machine around so you can see your notes if you've got it. But so what are your first criticisms of this paper?
I think the most obvious thing about this paper is that I think everybody saw this, that this paper is more like Portal 2 centric, Portal 2 oriented paper. And the most obvious thing is that, for example, one of the skills they tested was special skill, and testing special skill comparison with 2D game and 3D game is like, come on. Like, yeah, how you can even compare them in this sense.
Yeah, but
So what would be your defense around that?
but from what I can remember, the Musty game claims that it will train the spatial skills as well. And the test they use for spatial skill, at least the figural and vista skill, they use some pretty standard or commonly used tests, like the 3D rotation task and the SOT one. I don't remember the name.
Yeah, it's still like having 3D at least tasks. They could just take at least 2D tasks to measure special skills, because obviously that 3D tasks will be better in Portal.
Yeah, but the second test, Vista one, is actually a 2D.
Yeah, one of them was 2D, yeah, but still we could at least take where the both games were good about. Because there are a lot of tests to test cognitive skills, and they pick in only those ones. And
Yep. Okay, next.
yeah, pretest impact, what I thought is that it could be thing that they had this pretest and post-test, and between them training, but it could be that students could perform better because of the having pretests before testing, before training. So what I thought that they could have done is that having control group of students who would just have pretest and post-test, like without training, for example, or something like that.
So a passive control group.
Yeah.
Yeah, but still, the results show that Portal 2 players improve their skills more than the Musty players.
Yeah, but
And the Musty is a conservative control condition. So they had, because of the Musty game is designed specifically for brain training, and had created these expectations of gaining skills. It is a conservative control condition for Portal 2.
But I'm not telling about that Portal 2 couldn't win this game, but that just experiment that they could make would be more clear with this kind of things, with having just pre and post tests. Results.
So I in terms of being slightly Portal 2 biased, I think that that first hypothesis that Portal 2 outcomes will outperform Lumosity. It will be equal to or better than.
Yeah.
So their core assumption is Portal 2 is better.
Yeah.
Right? And so we have hypothesis that Portal 2 is better. And they're able to show that Portal 2 is better. Now, coming in with that as the hypothesis would suggest, and they say, well, so they try and defend it by saying, based on our literature review of the three focal constructs and aforementioned features of Portal 2 and Lumosity, we make the following. So they say, we did a review and that's justified why we think Portal 2 is going to be better. So let's test if we're right. And it kind of, it does imply a bias, right? It implies that you're trying to show that Portal 2 is better than Lumosity, right? So, and an active control group where you actually have a group doing something else and you're trying to show you're better than best in class, that's reasonable. Mm-hmm. But their core assumption that they are going to be better, I think does come through in, as you say, the way they tested is kind of designed to show that Portal was better. Well, that's what it seemed. Okay, so your control group would be, you could have a different control group, though admittedly they would pick an active control group, and it would be better than say, a group of people, we got these two groups of people, we locked these people in a room and they saw nothing, and these people got to play Portal, and the people who got to play Portal got better at spatial awareness things, right? That control group is perhaps worse, I would say worse, having just locking them in a room and letting them do nothing, than having a control group who were playing Lumosity.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it clear whether or not the Lumosity people knew that the other group were playing Portal. Right? I kind of assume they might have, because you're all selecting them from the same university, the same class.
With each other.
Yeah. And given gamers who would probably be the people volunteering for this, if they chatted to each other that, we got this shitty 2D testy game and you guys got Portal 2, these people might actually feel bad about the fact that they got the shitty brain training game. Right? Which could also influence persistence and you feel like you're in the good group versus the sad group.
That's what after second paper does, that they separated students. They choose students from other schools just to remove this bias.
Try and prevent that particular bias, which, given they recruited all from the same school here and they gave, there's the potential for and because they ran it over a couple of weeks, there's the high potential that those people in the experiment communicated with each other during that period. And so they haven't really controlled for that well, I would say. Okay, so and the next before we will get to these student questions, particularly if my computer connects.
And,
But yes.
Another Portal 2 thing is that this gameplay hours that I saw in the middle of the papers, they described that it was 8 gameplay hours players played in both groups. But does anybody know why 8 hours, not 10, not 6? Have any kind of suggestions or?
Like, doesn't really say anything about why they chose
No,
that.
they didn't. But when I look up how much time I spent playing Portal 2, and it was 8 hours. Like, and 8 hours is average gameplay hours to complete the game. And it was kind of tricky that they chose 8 hours. And what's next when you finish the game? How to like test? How to even train yourself when you finish the game? They just completely ignore this question. They could, for example, if they would take 15 hours, players finish the game, and what's next? And having luminosity, they have like infinity number of tasks and everything. And it was like another Portal 2 oriented. Yeah.
So so they're picking 8 because 8 is the completion of the game. You're comparing something which has, like a race car that has a tank that will last it 20 laps.
Yeah.
Versus a truck which will have a fuel tank that'll last, for 1,000 kilometers. And you just test it over those first 10K and go, look, the car with the small fuel tank got there first.
Yeah.
The truck's got longevity that you don't have in your Portal 2 game. So that is kind of an optimal length of time to get people to play Portal and see that yes, it's got a maximum effect, maximum time then, versus something that, if they spent 6 months doing luminosity, what would be the effects?
Yeah.
And I think that's
Absolutely, but the still work as an active.
it does work as an active controller. They're not just sitting there like reading the newspaper or sitting at paint, or watching paint dry, or something similar. Okay. Have you got another question before we move on to the general questions?
Well, one little remark is that this picture comparison test that they have done for persistence, it was self-developed, so it was not proven to test persistency, kind of. Yeah, and what they have done is that they removed like half of the test, saying that it turns out that students found this deception that there are pictures with not enough difference, and then we just drop out these results. But what I thought is that probably students didn't found this deception because it's hard to find deception. You can they have to scan all the picture and be pretty sure that there is no any more difference. What they have done, as from my point of view, is that found in, for example, it was you should find 4 differences, and they found 3 and couldn't find another one. They spent a lot of time on the first picture, and then they didn't find it. Yeah, just skip. And then the second picture, they spent less time, and then on the third picture, they thought, oh, come on, if I will spend too much time on this task, I will just fail the test, so I will skip whenever I will find this hard task. But that's actually what persistence means, that they skip this task. So they should take this, the whole pictures, the whole bunch of set, because I don't think that the students found out the deception. They just give up on having such a long time considering these 2 images.
So what your defense of a persistence test is and I would you as a group consider that a reasonable measure of persistence? Do you consider like the keeping trying to look for something that isn't there? have any thoughts from the audience?
At least towards the end, it will be okay. One picture, for example, but not more than that. Increase the difficulty, and then in the end, say, find 4 differences, and there are only 3, and then measure that how long they put effort on finding a difference.
Right.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't need to do this multiple times and ask people to give up and yeah. So
I can't really argument.
you say, well, you know, it's what they do.
They should have tested the tests more maybe before and verified its validity.
That it is somewhat correlated. So how would you validate that test appropriately tests persistence? What would be your experimental design?
I don't know, there's probably not any other good tool at testing persistence when they make their own anyways. So you can't really verify it against some other measurements. But what's important here is that they need to know if the students and participants actually find out being deceived or not. Find out if they're actually has the persistence or not.
So because the way they did it, I would be worried that the other thing, like you were mentioning, is actually not just testing persistence, but testing trust, right? Because I might be very persistent, but not very trusting, right? So when you say there are 4 differences, and I spot 3 and can't spot another one, at what point is my decision? I just don't trust that you know what you're doing, right? I just, I assume that you're an idiot. And so you've said there's 4 and there's only 3, right? It's not that I'm not persistent, it's that I don't trust you. Right? So there is an element of when you trust versus how persistent you are. Now, my experimental design would be you would need to take this test, find, as you were thinking, a gold standard for persistence, right? Now, that's either another test that exists or human perception, right? So you would look at people doing an analysis, having a psychological analysis done by a psychologist of all the participants, and go through a personality trait assessment and get a trained observer to say, that person is a persistent person. That person, looking at their life history and looking at what they've achieved and how they've achieved those things, big, long time kind of, you have to put effort in, and then you compare the results of that analysis with your test, right? And so the idea is you can only do that on like 20 odd people, and then you do your short test on 20 people. If they're highly correlated, you can then say, aha, this short test is a nice way of short-circuiting this long test process, right? And that's usually what we try and do, right? Usually what you do is you have, and they do this in medicine, you often have very, very expensive tests for some illnesses, right? But you don't want to run that test unless you're fairly sure someone might have it, right? So what you do is you have another pre-test, which is a cheap test, but is far less accurate, right? But you make sure that it's sensitive. So if someone has something, you'll definitely pick it up. And then you go on to the expensive test, right? So in this case, you're looking for, is there correlation? Yep. Yep. 12 upstairs. I sent an email. Okay. So yeah, as you have this kind of persistence thing, as you should have a potentially expensive long time process to test persistence, and your short circuit, do this test, will test how persistent you are. Huh? So
probably they should design tasks that obviously solvable, that you can see that it's solvable, but it's very hard. And probably maybe not it's impossible to solve in this amount of time, but it's obviously solvable somehow like that. Because with this different image, it's not obvious that there is actually a difference. Yeah. At least they would remove this trust bias.
Unfortunately, I also have a short circuit for doing these kind of tests. If you cross your eyes over and overlap the two images, anything that is different between them gives a flicker in your eyes. So I can do them incredibly quickly by just doing that and going bang, 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 bang. So yeah, and which means if I found 3 out of 4, I'd say, no, there isn't a 4. I know because
You can see it.
I can see it because I'm using my visual system to do the detection for me. So, there are short circuits. Okay, so now it's time to go and have a look at the questions. So actually, could you pop up, seeing you've got the thing? Oh, actually, I can plug it. I've got it here. Successfully proved their intention, which is to say that Portal 2 was better than Lumosity. Okay, so a couple of people felt that they did enough to show that. How many people felt that they didn't do enough to show that it was better than Lumosity? Okay, so we've got a kind of mixed group. And so yeah, we've got kind of, so some of these questions, we should be able to see that some people feel it's enough, some people don't. Now, teasing out that difference is important for understanding papers. And understanding, some people will believe it, some people won't. If we look at these questions, how much now, as I said, this is a leading question. All right, it's got a hidden assumptions that this is actually purchase research in some way. This is a bit of a mean question to ask someone. Right, this falls under the when did you stop beating your wife question. Right, so generally I wouldn't have used this. And I doubt that Portal 2 would actually have, Valve would actually pay for this kind of research anyway, because they don't care about brain training, right? They don't actually, they're not trying to defeat Lumosity in any way. This isn't an area they're interested in, so there's no way they would pay people to do this, right? You're more likely to find this is a person who plays games who is irritated by Lumosity games and says, these other games are just so much better, like in everything, right? So I would say it's more personal interest that motivates the potentially skewed hypothesis than financial gain. And one of the other things that people seem to forget with paying to do things, most university lecturers don't actually see any of the money that they get in research funding. Right? If I get research funding, I don't get a salary bump. Right? I don't even see any of that money. Right? It goes to the school. Right? It's not, so there's no personal gain in getting research money. Right? So all those criticisms about personal gain stuff, I got, let's say I got 10 million euro. I don't get 10 million euro. The university gets 10 million euro, and it keeps paying my salary. It was going to pay my salary anyway. So I have no difference. So yeah, I get more flexibility maybe. Okay, so
you may get a few extra papers out.
Yeah, I get a few extra papers, and it might help my salary progression sometime later. I might get it via, but it's not direct.
Is that the same on every school?
I know that NITH, Vestadals, had a policy where if you got external funding, you actually got a salary pay increase, right? So for some some schools you can get salary bumps, but not at general universities in Norway. So,
but you never get directly the money you're getting in your own pocket.
Yeah,
no.
That
is never the case.
You might get bonuses, maybe. Though in the UK, if you don't get external funding, you get fired. So they have a different motivation there, where you don't get the money, but if you don't get the money, you lose your job. So it's even more pressure. Which actually sometimes I feel bad about applying for funding, because I know if I get it, it has no effect on me. But if the people I'm competing against don't get it, they lose their jobs. So I'm stealing from them, and they've got much worse consequences than me if I lose. So should I try as hard? Is it ethical for me to take the money off them so they get fired. Yeah. So question one, how can a 2D game, we've covered that one. So was that your question?
No.
No, but it's a good question. Yeah, so I think we covered that one. How can we expect significant positive results after 8 hours of playing Lumosity? Again, so this is the question of given that Lumosity is this slow burn idea of, you do it a small amount over a long period of time, slowly incrementing. What would be the challenge of doing the study over several months? What would be some of the challenges if we were to do it over several months?
Portal is on 8 hours long.
So you don't run out of Portal to compare against.
Yeah.
Right? What other challenges might you have over these tests over that length of time?
Potential increased number of bias.
So what kind of bias might you have?
So that's a lot of them, like students could more deeply communicate with each other. It would be possible that they play in other games. They have school and trainings there. I don't know.
So the potential for other learning to occur, right? So this is one of the challenges, certainly dealing with children. These are not children, these are university students, but they're still at university, so they're still studying, which means they're trying to get better at stuff. And certainly when you deal with children, a maths intervention, if you did it over several months, everybody in the class will get better at maths. It's just, that's what kids do. They get better at stuff. So the longer the study, the more confounding variables you would have. Okay, so so this question, they explicitly mentioned, a very finicky question to them. They explicitly mentioned they use Sony headphones. What does it matter when they don't mention which model? Right? It's this product placement statement. This is a criticism question, which is more like, why didn't you do it properly kind of question. And I would agree with you that the mention of saying they use Sony headphones without saying the model is actually important, because Sony doesn't just sell one model, and they sell everything from cheap-ass headphones through to massively expensive headphones. And if audio was something that was critical, that would be a complete kind of fail in terms of giving actually being a useful thing to have said. It kind of falls under the here we are there. Is this, yeah, they're just trying to say, oh yeah, they use headphones. Oh yeah, we're supposed to mention what kind, Sony. Right? It's a kind of afterthought comment. So it's not really a massive criticism, and they weren't generally testing audio, so they probably didn't really matter. So it's a bit of a fine, detailed question. It's something we might mention to you guys if you're writing a paper. Right? If you're writing your master's thesis, we'd probably say you might need to mention the brand. Right? But it's generally not a massive criticism. Would you?
Might be that we think you get Sony is among the better ones.
Slightly higher quality. Yeah, they're trying to imply that they weren't just completely crappy ones.
I think it's a valid question. Is what is the information that you contribute by doing that?
Yes.
If you just say the high end without saying
The brands, yeah.
So what's the actual information content? And it's pretty null, I would say. So it's not important information anyway.
And it doesn't really help you with replicating the study, right? Is because at the time you buy them, you go, well, they use Sony headphones. Which, yeah.
Let's get the cheapest pair of
Let's get the cheapest pair of Sony headphones. It'll be fine. We're repeating the study. Okay, so would training. So would training problem solving and spatial skills in real life be more yielding, be better basically than Portal or Lumosity? So basically, if you were going to be measuring spatial skills, the other choice of active control group could be real world spatial skills. You give them a bunch of block spatial cubes to do, and you get them to do it in real life, right? I think that's a reasonable criticism, right? I think if you're going to test a real life spatial orientation skill, potentially training people with real life spatial orientation might defeat both of these virtual things, right? So, and there is from my point of view, there is no answer that this paper has to that, because that's not what they tested against, right?
Or design.
It's a design, it's methodology criticism that you're testing, what you are testing against. Okay, so they mentioned persistence. We did go through the persistence. Was playing for 8 hours straight. That's actually answered in the paper, right? Though, was it bad? So no, I didn't actually say whether they played 8 hours straight within one day. They just said they were given time to play, right? So they didn't actually say, oh, don't play for 8 hours straight. You're supposed to play for 2 hours a day, 2 hours the next day. They just said, do 8 hours by the end.
Might be mixing with the other paper, but didn't they have 3 sessions?
They had some 3 sessions.
No, 3 sessions.
3 sessions. Oh, for the Le Mans, it may actually.
One of the paper had some specific sessions with like 3 hours or something.
Cool.
I can't do.
You get to see what I was looking at on my screen. So, participants, the procedure, problem solving, where did they say that?
You can search for 8 hours because it was clearly stated. 10 hours.
8H. Okay,
Just 8.
8H. Log files. So they were 3 individual performance indicators collecting the players' log files after 8 hours of full campaign. A number of levels were completed.
And the 3.2 procedure. Each participant spent 10 hours in the study, which spanned 4 separate sessions in the on-campus laboratory of the university across 1 to 2 weeks. Each of the first 3 sessions lasted 3 hours. Sessions 4 lasted 1 hour.
Mm-hmm.
Process, battery, right, so yeah, it was in there. Yeah. So,
Okay.
total of 8 hours gameplay. So they played it during the time. Yeah. I have to call. Okay, so these two have to go because they've got another meeting. The last thing I was going to chat about. Okay, so we've got. I thought I'd also, before we have the break, discuss very shortly. Did people read this first paper? It was only a 4-pager, so you had a look. What did you think of that argument about meta-analysis of brain training? Did you understand what was going on in that short 4-pager?
Not in that one. So I had to go to another reply, and then I had to go to the
original. So you
paper.
actually you bounced through the 3 meta reviews to scan them and have a look. Do you understand that this is one of the ways that academic research works? Right?
I didn't know.
Okay, you didn't know.
That was my first, yeah.
Right. So the process here is, someone does meta-analysis, someone else sees it and says, that's a shitty analysis. They reanalyze it and they look, see, it was shitty. And the first person comes back and think, no, it wasn't. Yeah. Stop telling us it was shitty. Right? So, this is a very public kind of forum for debating the quality of research, right? And so the reason why I gave it to you was to show you, and these were papers from like December 15, right? So these are, this is a current argument that's happening now between these 2 groups of researchers, right? And they are very much arguing about whether any of this stuff is useful and possible, right? Because that's basically why I gave it to you, because that was a meta review saying, is there any evidence that you can train this stuff, right? So this paper on Portal is saying, well, look, you played games and you got better at something. One of the main criticisms is, how long do you think that improvement lasts? So you two, how long do you think the improvement lasts? Do you think it lasts?
No.
No. Do you think it lasts?
On this 8 hours training, no, I don't.
No. Okay. So we've got 2 notes up here. Well, let me ask you, do you think this 8 hours would be a permanent change, or do you think it would just be a short-term change? Short-term.
In some sense, a long term. If you open a portal like 4 years later, you don't have an easier time playing through it again.
So there are some long-term changes that might occur. right? But they might be very specific to that. Okay. So have any of you seen? I don't know if I gave you some of those visual analysis tests. Okay, what we'll do is we'll take the break. We'll be back at 1:15. We'll have a summary first. So your summary of this paper. Do you think it was, like, rather than taking the positive, do you honestly believe that it was an interesting and useful contribution?
Found it interesting. I'm not sure about usefulness because of it's just a short-term thing.
And what would you take from the paper? What would be your lesson that you would take from it?
Let's see. Maybe there's no reason to do such short-term experiments.
Short-term experience, you know, they might show something, but that might not actually be useful. What would you take from the paper?
Well, it was interesting to read this. Maybe not very useful for science, but what I think they was able to show that games can compete with professionally developed brain training programs applications.
So are we fairly comfortable that Portal 2 is not significantly worse than Lumosity?
Yes.
Right. So do you think so who thinks they did enough to show that Portal 2 is not significantly worse than playing Lumosity? I think they did enough for that.
I'm a bit unsure about long-term again.
Whether either of them are effective long-term is still left open, right? They haven't shown whether either of them are effective long-term. But the argument is, if you're going to choose between doing 8 hours of Lumosity or 8 hours of Portal 2, at least choosing to do the Portal 2 is probably not going to be worse than choosing to do Lumosity.
And actually, in their defense, what we can say is that actually Portal 2 has such thing as user-created levels. So that could be a like extension of the gameplay.
So you could start moving into the other levels as being the way in which you kind of extend the 8 hours.
And sometimes they are even more challenging than originally defined levels. So there is actually even like improvement.
Yep. Yep. I think that you're right. Some of them are definitely more challenging than the original ones. Okay, so we'll take a break now, 15 minutes. 10 minutes. Come back at 1:15. Stand up, walk around. I'll set up a visual experiment to show you that you can have some permanent long-term changes. But I have to do it now, and then we have to do this again at the end of the semester. So, but go ahead, have your break. Come back in 10 minutes. Because one of the interesting things with humans, there are some things which you do once, and we know this fact that so with like some images stuff, right? Where I show you something you can't see it. Once I've shown you what you're looking at,
I will remember
for the rest of your life, you'll look at that thing and know what it is, right? It kind of is a permanent kind of tick, and it's done, right? The rest of your life.
Should I stop the broadcast or just leave it on?
No, I think we can just continue it running. Hello, internet people.
It was actually one story that one of the actors in theater said that there is a railway station and a railway road across the whole country, for example. And what usually people think is that you drivers on trains, they usually just sit on their station and driving through the whole country and end up and turn around and go back. Yeah. But the reality is that on the whole station they have a lot of middle stations, and this driver he throws only to the first one, and then this train like go away and new one connected, and it continues go, and it's one just return. So those guys that are drivers of train, they usually just travels like their whole life. They just on this short
haul. Yeah. So unlike when I suppose if they think of it like a plane journey. If you're flying a plane journey, you do fly all the way to the end, right? Because you don't have lots of stops, and they don't think of people getting like the driver could get off. And change, or they can change the front engine. Or usually, if the driver gets off and the other driver gets on, and they do that. So they can they will sometimes change engines. It just takes more time to do that. But
the thing is that before that, you know this fact, you thought that this is like a very interesting job just to like go through the whole country, and now you know that that's just this thing, and you will remember this whole life.
Once you know that fact, it sticks. So there are some things which are sticky like this, and it's really it's interesting to kind of work out what those are and why they are.
In this Portal game, for example, when I was playing the first game, the first episode, and I was better on the second episode than I would be in the first place if I would start with the second one. But I'm not sure if it's...
So had you played, you played Portal before?
Yeah.
Actually, I didn't ask how many people had played Portal, but I assume Portal was one of the games that quite a few people had played.
Yes.
Though not many of you have Luminosity accounts, it would seem. So, for a few problems, yes, to calibrate your starting point. No, okay. They've reset my account. I'd always been inactive for over a year, and they've reset my Luminosity account. So, games in your 50s. Okay. Try again. Loading. I haven't got full access. I've only got limited. But it seems that my internet is terribly slow again today. In this room, it's this room, the terrible room. But so I suppose it's that part of that question is it? I want to give the meta one, right? Because the meta analysis is kind of like a meta question of is this at all possible? Right? These two are both like trying to do something, and the meta analysis is saying, are you even? Right? Are all of your ideas just completely silly? So that's kind of why, though it's not one that you would necessarily directly present as a paper, because as a meta paper, there are a whole bunch of other issues around how do you analyze it, how you do meta analysis. And I don't know, you guys wouldn't have done many meta analysis papers covering it's easier to start with actual facts, which is why I kind of gave you these two. But I thought the meta analysis discussion was an interesting discussion, to see argument in the community.
What I thought that they had this in-game performance measurements for luminosity was brain something.
Yeah, they make that.
And for Portal, they use the number of portals, time spent for the 1 round, I think, and the number of solved tasks. But the thing is that they didn't specify if they involved their participants about this measurement. Because, for example, for me, I was shooting portals all the time just because it was just fun.
It's fun. Because there's no cost, right? Because it's not there's nothing in the game that says it's bad for you to play. It's not like you spend reasons to fire a portal, right? You can fire it. and you're running down the corridor, bang, bang, bang,
Yeah.
bang.
An elevator, for example, I was just in the portal just to enjoy myself.
Because the portal was back. Yeah. And I saw a presentation from Will Wright talking about how they'd actually, before Portal had come out, they had written an example of a slightly different version with portals, where you'd also you'd use it to change size. So doing a sort of Alice through the looking glass, right?
Yeah.
You'd have a mirror, and you'd have two mirrors, and you'd pass things through the size-changing mirror and change the mirror to size and do that. So that kind of experiment place. And so he showed a very early prototype of that, but they couldn't work out how to make an interesting game out of it, right? Which is, so. But the Portal people did find a way of making an interesting game, and were very successful. But there are some other games, and I can't remember its name, but you get where you have since Portal, the Portal concept of putting things through something and having coming out and being able to change size or retaining velocity.
I saw this, but I don't remember.
Yeah, there are a few of them. One was like where you had perspective changing things. Yes, and
you can make it really huge and or just
which I think is a neat perceptual thing. And certainly, I think where that becomes really interesting is now that with headsets with VR.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of stuff that's going to happen with VR and Portal style games that become really, really interesting, because you have that depth perception and you have things where you can look around and see things. So I think there's going to be a resurgence in that in that style of gameplay. I'm just trying to get any internet. It just has returned.
Just return no.
Just about.
The problem with doing optical illusion stuff is that if people know what your optical illusion is, then they can, they'll already see it, so you don't have the same effect as you might want.
How you hide it?
Well, if they know what you're looking for, if they know what they're looking for, then they can find it. But if they don't know what they're looking for, they can't find it. So you have to show it without them knowing what they're looking for.
You will start with this, so I
No, it's from let's see. I feel like
Okay, just page. Okay. Right. Can you figure out what this is a picture of? No. It's an ink blot, isn't it? Right? You know, yes, this is your father abusing your mother. I see money raining from heaven. I see a spider. Okay, so how many people think they know what that looks like? Okay, one person. What do you think it is?
It's a guitar or holding a guitar.
Someone holding a guitar.
Yeah.
An interesting potential.
Can you say that again?
Someone holding a guitar is the idea. Actually, give up, click here. I know what it is, and once you see it, this is an interesting change. No matter how long it takes you, like no matter when in the future I test you, so and they've done this. This is a standard psych test in like the 60s. 20 years later, I show you the same image, you instantly know what it is. Right? So it is in fact
A cow.
a cow. Cow, ears, eyes, nose. Once you see it as a cow, right? In a week's time, if I show you the same image, you go, oh yeah, that's that cow. Right?
You can make everything with this type of.
No, that is actually, you can't make anything. I can't make like the Twin Towers, right? There aren't too large vertical structures. You still can't see it.
Can you click on go back?
Back to illusion. Eye, ear, nose. Right, and this is the shading of the cow. Now, if I actually go back, the reason why I had to very quickly click onto there was because you can see here that there are lots of people who have shown this image in various ways and drawn around it and stuff. There is also, so there are some ones where cow is one of those. There's also, so visual illusion cow, visual illusion Dalmatian. This is the page.
Yeah.
Mysterious dot optical illusion. Okay. So normally when you see that, you go, well, it's just a bunch of dots. Okay? No? You can see the dog?
Yeah.
When you know when you know there's supposed to be a dog there, you see the dog, and from now on, anytime you see that image, your brain will go dog for you. Right? You won't have to think about it, it just recognizes dog. And that's a permanent change.
Yeah, I think the title gives it away.
The title, but it's a very specific permanent change, right? And it is only for that image. You don't get better at recognizing Dalmatians in other images, right? This is not your Dalmatian detector is now better, right? It is very specific to that image in that presentation, right? So it's, yeah.
Can this be explained?
It's because we have so many neurons that yes, you are actually making a change in the synaptic connections, and that change, given the holistic presentation, will be kind of stored, right? So it is a stored memory. So visual perceptions do get stored in that way. It appears that it does require you to have some affinity to the thing you're doing. So you have to, like, it has to be a concept like a cow or a dog, or not just I see something and then I always remember I've seen it, right? It's not like photographic memory that everybody has, right? Because we don't have photographic memory, right? But it is this thing mapped to this concept. So long as you've got a concept and mapped to it, it seems to be able to regenerate that concept from that input. So yeah, but no, there are a lot of kind of, well, a lot. There are several of these things where once you've seen it, you will always remember it in that way. So, and of course you have other ones where it's like terrible visual illusions. So I'll just see if this visual illusion works on you guys. Let's see, which isn't a memory one. It's that. Oh, that's the dot moving, right. Best visual illusions of the year contest, right. It's really interesting to look at visual illusion. Do you guys, does that look like it's moving occasionally?
Yeah.
If you look at some of the spots, you'll find that bits of it will appear to start moving. Yeah, that's because of the way your eyes work. Yeah, you look around it and it's the way that your rods and cones are working will create visual movement, even though there is none. Okay, right, so on to the next paper. So, come on up. And Magnus, you're the opponent. You can go and sit there. Yeah. Oh, you can. Oh, you don't have to come up now. We can just do the presentation bit first.
Okay, our next paper is called Differential Effect of Motivational Features on Training Improvements in School-Based Cognitive Training. So what they have investigated is that how motivational gamification features can influence cognitive training in school years age. In introduction, they compare or investigated some other researchers on this topic, and what they said is that results from this researchers' studies vary a lot, and they test only either all features enabled or none of them, and it was a short testing time period. And also that results, they explain this variety of results because game itself can influence how the motivational features will work. So they designed test application. Actually, it was designed for other papers they understood, but they just used it. It's application for special working memory training task, and they had 5 motivations: scores for performance and measurement, like changing themes and art of background, prizes that you can buy for scores, end of session certificates, and lives and levels. They invited more than 100 students from 7 schools with average age of 10.65, and 44% were girls. They made pretest, which consists of 3 blocks of 70 images. Each block has 5 images that they had to recognize. I probably should show this image. So the task was to say whether current image was appeared to image back. So when they saw this cactus for second time, they have to say that it was 2 images back. So they had 17 pictures in total. 5 of them were like the ones that you have to click that they were there already, and 10 of them were just unique. And performance was measured as a number of correct answers minus number of wrong answers. As for training, they used similar task, but it was n back task. The pretest was 2 back task, and it has 10 rounds, and each image was shown for only 0.5 seconds and 2.5 seconds to switch the image. It was in total 15 plus n features with 5 targets and 10 plus n non-targets. This n defines the level. Level was adjusted with this rule if somebody performed for more than or equal 4 errors, then the life was decreased. In total, they had 3 lives. If they lose all their lives, then level will decrease. And if there were less than 4 errors, then level increased. So this is how it looks like. The first picture is with everything enabled, with all motivational things. It's frog jumping on these green things. And the task was to say if this frog was on the same place and jumps before, something like that. And this is the different team and art backgrounds they used. The prizes box, children could like buy prizes for having enough scores and certificates end of session. And this is how they removed this motivation things. For example, no score displayed or no lives and levels. And they got this result. The one thing was that during the experiment, it was experimental error. The version that was meant to exclude the certificates also excluded lives and levels, so they just mixed up everything. But actually, the reasonable question was that why they remove motivational these 5 motivational things from their games and not add them. So they have one version with all elements, and they have one version without any elements. And they have 5 versions removed, one of each. But why they remove them, why not they add them? The reason they explained was that they used already developed game, and those things were interconnected with each other, so it was hard to present only one of them. For example, prizes, how you can like make only prizes without scores, because you have to buy prizes with the scores and everything. So they removed one, but in the end it resulted that what they measured is the which of these motivational things had worst impact on the results. So if they remove, for example, prices, the results increase. So then prices is a bad thing to have, or something like that. So the results was were like that. No points, for example, was the best option, but actually what they saw is that it was not significantly like, for this to make some claims. And they have another problem that because they choose 7 schools, they didn't want to have different games inside one school because it could influence the results in terms that it was 3 days 3 days test, and students could communicate with each other, and one of them would have prizes, one of them would not, or something like that, and it could influence the results. So they just separated these games between schools. But the result was that average age of the participants was different for different schools, and it could influence the result as well. So they added age as a covariant to their experiment, and was tried to. This is performance results on this 3 days run increase, and they was trying to calculate age average results for age of 1065 based on their results, and they got these results. So conclusion was that having points removed really increases the results, even compared with all motivation factors or without them, or without any of them. And they explain it in the way that points distract a lot. The thing was that actually they had points, but they were not just shown. They were shown in the end of the session. So yeah, it was just test of distraction thing. That's pretty all I think.
Yep. Okay, thank you. I'll go and man them.
So my first argument against is that this paper doesn't really contribute anything new. I mean, it only shows that distracting elements in a game when you need to concentrate are distracting you, which is already well known. think. So, yeah.
Okay, so it doesn't contribute much. What would you argue?
The initial thought was that it was a lot of investigation, considering how these motivational features influence results on some studies, but all gamification features elements, but not each of them. So they wanted to investigate how each of them will influence. It turned out that they didn't influence much, but it's still investigation. So what they investigated then, that it doesn't matter if you have like 7 of features or 6 of them or 5 of them, it doesn't matter. What matters more is that you have them at all or not, and that you should pay attention on the destructive things. So even if it was null hypothesis, it's still investigation, it's still research.
So what it adds is in theory, therefore, a further investigation as to whether or not it's useful to have particular game features. Right? Now, for me, this reductionist approach where you pull out individual features and try them independently has the potential of doing the white chocolate kind of mode of thinking. Because I don't know if I've used this example for you guys, but yes, if you pull out cocoa from chocolate, right, and taste it, have you guys tasted cocoa beans by themselves? They're disgusting. Okay? So if you look at chocolate and took out its components, you'd say, you know, milk, meh, sugar, yeah, that's nice. Cocoa beans, disgusting. Right. So we should just give people sugar, right? None of you want chocolate. You just want, you know, a bowl of sugar. That's what's nice. You could say the same about bread, right? I mean, you pull out the stuff out of bread and, you know, yeast. Try yeast by itself. Oh, what we do that in New Zealand. It's called Marmite. But straight yeast, most people don't like straight yeast by itself. It's fairly disgusting stuff. And yet, you know, it serves purpose in bread. And you pull out flour by itself and go, yeah, no, why would you put that in your food? So, I mean, this kind of a reductionist approach, if games are a complex system, you might not find value in just one part of it by itself, right? And so they're assuming here that there aren't complex interactions between all of these parts, which is, so yeah. So I find that is this kind of approach is odd. Okay, so next criticism.
So yes, it's that this test or this experiment they don't really remove the gameplay features themselves. They remove the GUI features, like the graphical user interface. The scores are still there.
So yeah, so the players probably are still aware of the score, you think, right? So you think because if they...
At least when they have the prizes and they know that player scores will give prizes, they still have that motivation part in the game.
Yeah, it's just whether or not they're displaying it to you. So what are your thoughts? How would you counter that?
The motivation for that was, as I understood, that the game was developed already, so they just reused already developed game, and it was easier to just remove them from the sites of the students. Yeah, but also they can claim that they didn't want to turn this game to not game. They wanted it still be the game, but just with some tiny tiny differential between them, like removing the levels, removing prices, something like that, and how this influence. They didn't want to test like non-game application training something with game application. They did want to investigate the influence of these features.
These features. So my counter would be that what they claim is around the distraction nature rather than knowledge that you're being assessed, right? So they're not claiming that you don't know you're being assessed and it's no knowledge of being assessed. It's their distraction that it's right there in front of you. So, for example, from my own experience, my wife Rachel was playing Sudoku on her phone, right? And there were two different Sudoku programs. One had a timer in the top corner. Now, the timer wasn't actually connected to, like, you didn't have a limited time to solve it or anything like that. It was just informative, telling you how long you'd spent on that particular Sudoku puzzle, right? She felt terrible because she felt like it was judging her all the time that she had spent too long, right? So she hated that version of Sudoku. So she started playing another version that didn't have a timer, just because the timer felt like it was, you know, imposing a perception of you should be doing this faster. Right? So if their argument is just having the score on screen might be bad.
Yeah, that goes back to my first argument. I think that game designers already are aware of this kind of issues with distraction. So I don't see the value in it, but maybe researchers will see it.
Right. So perhaps it's valuable for researchers who aren't particularly good game designers to try and make them better game designers by telling them, look, don't overload your interface with massive numbers of things.
Maybe they just should use game designers. Hire them.
Hire a good game designer. To some extent, this does raise the question of pointsification, adding points. Is that a useful thing to do? Now, it doesn't really dig in here as to individual variation and improvement, right? Because they talk about these average improvements, right? But they didn't dig in to say, well, do we have different player types? Is there a player type who doesn't like score? Are humans uniform player types, right? Because we talk about player types. So it could be that there are a bunch of player types here who just, you know, really hate seeing the score, and some who like seeing the score. So what's your average benefit from putting the score in? Well, if you had a group who hated score and a group who loved score, you put score in, these get wider variation, but their average might still be the same. Right? Because, you know, good for some, bad for others, average is the same. Okay? So how much could be potential that there are different population sizes here? There are different types. There are 2 or 3 different types of people who prefer or dislike things. So what do you feel that it adequately approached that as a potential?
Well, they pick students by random, so they can say that it was like uniformly distributed.
Well, their argument is that, you know, that those personality types would be distributed across each population equally, right? But then, yeah.
The case.
Or even like if you have a group who like something and a group who don't, and they're mixed up in both areas, it's like, are you going to be diluting your results by having those, right? Because if I took, what's the easiest way of saying this? So if
you mean that if they could add covariant variable like game types?
Yeah, player types.
Yeah, we could see very different results.
Yeah,
that could be the case.
Because so they picked age as being a covariant that they thought might be in, but they haven't picked player types or motivational features of individuals in any way, right? So they I wonder if that's for me something missing here is when you talk about motivation features and when we talk about player types, these things appeal to different player types. More so, I would say that the variation in player types is potentially greater than the variation in age, right? Or even the variation in gender, right? And maybe that, I mean, just allocating even boys and girls. I mean, I would say there is more variation within player types than there is between genders, right? Because I think you'll find there's some killers, plenty of females who are that style of competitiveness, right? So I don't, yeah. So, okay. So next criticism.
So they say this in the paper that they assign groups on a camp level rather than individual. So and the group sizes are actually really small. So is this representative? Can the age make too much of an effect on the result?
So yeah, given that they're small sizes and there were different ages in different camps. So yeah. What do you think? You also agree? You can just agree and say, well, yeah.
Yeah, that's actually true. That sizes of their groups were small. Even though they had 100 students, which is a big actually group to investigate, but they had a lot of groups of like separation groups. So they have actually 7 of them. So, well, in the end of the papers, in discussion, they said that it's generalization. It's not generalization. You can't generalize based on this paper. It's just a way how you can. It's just a way to find the best for more research or something like that. The way when you can investigate more. Like
so one defense of this is that they're using the one where they could defend is saying, well, we did run statistics on it, right? And the statistics showed that there were some that were statistically different, right? So, for example, here you can see that they're explicitly saying that those first few, yeah, you're right. There's no statistics to say that 0.01 difference between no theme and all motivational features was actually a real difference, right? It's almost certainly like a p.93. There's a 93% chance theoretically that these are completely identical in every way, right? That there is no difference at all. And the 80% chance there's no difference between no prizes. There's this kind of 16% chance with no motivational features. So it's kind of maybe, we don't know. And the lastly, they say there's statistically significant difference, right? Which means there's only a 1 in 20 chance that this is lying to you, right? Now they've already done like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different conditions. So a 1 in 20 chance of you lying, they've already got 6 variations. So they've used up 6 of their 1 in 20 chance of lying. So, eventually if you do enough 0.5% chance of lying, one of them is going to be a lie, right? So if you had 30 conditions all going to 95% confidence interval, you could kind of get one of them to be true randomly because it just happened to be true or happened to kind of fall in the 5%. Right? So I wouldn't be so confident of those last 2 are as certain that definitely this is 100% true and generalizable, right? So as they say, it's small enough that it may just be a sampling error that they had. But the fact that all 3 of those were consistently better, maybe there's enough, you collect them together to say, well, it probably matters for this game with this age group.
Yeah.
So this game, this age group, this task, this matters. How generally valuable that is, I'm unsure. But as you say, so for a game designer, this idea of how cognitively loaded you are depends on how much more you should throw at the player. Okay? Now, have you guys? Did you try doing an in-back test?
Yeah.
How good are you?
I did a dual in-back because that's what I found.
Right, you found a dual in-back.
Yeah.
How was it?
It was okay for the 2-back. I made the second try, I got 100%, but when I got to 3-back, I just completely fail.
So 3 back was too hard. So so the rest of you, have you tried NBAC? Because I can show you NBAC on my machine. Just so you know what kind of task we're talking about, because this is a very specific cognitive training task. And I have my login there and there. So one of the ones I've used for this is called Cognitive Fun. And so Cognitive Fun has a whole bunch of tests that you can do. And so this is the 2 back. So you reckon the changing it to the 3 back is, okay, why is it? Thought I could change it there. Okay.
Yeah, maybe on the arrow.
Yeah. Wow, it's tiny. Okay, so we'll try the 3 back. So here, when I start the test, I've got to remember, you guys can try and help me. Cat, fish, fish, ball, car, fish. Yes. Yes. Boom. It's a car. Yep. Spoon. Oh, I got that one wrong. Yes, I got that one right. Car, no. Pencil, yes. Car, no. Ah, it was. Ah, because there were 2 cars. And there was pencil, yes. Car, yes. Car, no. It was cheese. Pencil, yes. Car, yes. Pencil, no. Fit cat, no. Cheese, no. Cat, no, because it was before that. Ball, no. Cheese, yes. Book, no. Heart, no. Cheese, yes. Book, yes. Book, no. Cat, yes. Ah! Book, ah! Cheese. Ah! Cat, yes. Book, no. Ah, it was yes. Peter, no. Ah! Right, okay, yeah. Okay, so, if you click randomly, you're generally going to get it wrong. Yes. Ah! Cheese.
Yes.
Ball.
No.
No. Ah! Fish.
No.
It's been a while since we've been a fish. Was there a pencil? There was a pencil. There was a ball? There was a ball. There was a cheese? No. So eventually, there's a results available now. So I can see how well I did in that compared to everyone else, right? So that's the 3 back. So 50% correct. Average response time quite large. Go to stats page. So how are we doing in our stats? So if you're interested in cognitive testing yourself, so there we are we're quite long. And yes, so not very good. I did the 2 back just recently, as in when you started. So I did quite well. I'm quite good at 2 back. Right? I can 3 back.
It's even harder when you have dual and back, where both images and a sound.
Yes, when there's an image and a sound, and you've got it, and they're independent. That's quite bad. So this is if you look at Cognitive Fun, you can actually, if you guys, it's for free. There are lots and lots of cognitive tests in here, and you can build it builds this supposed graph of your ability across a whole bunch of these different tests, right? So as you can see, I've not done much time, but you could try this, right? And they test different things. Okay, so back to questions, and actually we can grab the questions up. So we've got 10 minutes left. So yes, do you have any final criticisms?
No.
That you wanted to say? No. Okay, so if we have a look at these questions for this one, actually I suppose I can throw the questions up. What went there? There. Alright. Okay. So, are these game elements a good representation of the possible game elements? What do you? That's a fair question, right? Because basically, this is a question that says, are you representing the space of potential reasonable game mechanics? Right here, they're just talking about basically points, badges, and leaderboards. Right? It's the standard sort of gamification kind of criticism, right? And saying, is that all there is to game? Well, they talk about theming, I suppose, is the other one they did talk about. There wasn't really as much. I mean, there's the story, I suppose, is frogs on a lily pad, but I'm not sure if that counts as story. Would you guys think that counts as story? No, I wouldn't really count it as a story. Aesthetic maybe, but not story. So, of these features, do you think they are the core of what makes a game a game?
Of course, slice and dice. Yeah, probably the most game-like.
The game-like things they use in here, but is that a fair reflection of games in general, do you think?
General.
So we have Håkon going, no, I wrote a paper about this last semester around gamification. So yeah, and I think that's it's a fair question. Is this game really game-like enough, and are they picking out the features appropriately? Right. So that would be a reasonable criticism. What is the advantage is to perform this study at a summer camp rather than in classes at school, where the age of the participant does not matter this much? Okay, so why would you do this at a summer camp?
Was to not let them like discuss things between the groups. Like so, the one that got prizes or didn't get prizes can be envious of those who got prizes. Yeah.
Yeah. So you need it provides you a way of separating out kids in a particular way. That might be hard in a school environment.
Probably doing these tests during the school time, they have classes and everything, and that's 3-day round tests. In summer camp, it's okay because I think teachers were very happy that children were bothered with something. They don't have to think what to do with them. Yeah, in summer camp, it's totally okay, but in this school time, 3 days round test, I don't know.
So the next, yeah, what are the reasons of testing this particular age group? If I was to rewrite that question, it would be, I would probably say something like, what were the motivations rather than reasons? So I use motivation rather than reasons. But I might also say, ask more a question of how did this age group influence the value of the research, right? So like did the age group change? Would you expect the age group to change the results that you had had, right? So how significant is this age group for the results? Right? So would you get a different result with different age group? And the reason to test this particular age group, probably convenient sample, right? It's that, they had access to a summer camp. And so the kids who went to the summer camp, that was the age they got, which is probably why they had different ages at different summer camps, not because they got to tell people which summer camp they should go to, but because, these were the ones we had access to, and those were the age of the kids they had. So, that was the resource we had to test with. So it's more of the fact that was possible for them to do. So they're making the best out of the resources they have rather than being able to choose any resource in any way, right? So, because ideally, I'm sure they would agree, ideally you would have exactly the same age, you'd have exactly the same socioeconomic group, you would have exactly the same previous experience, and you would match them all. And you'd tell the kids, okay, all of you lot are going to do this with this randomized trial across all of you and stuff. But they don't have enough money to pay parents to put their kids, to hire a bunch of kids at that age for this length of time. could there have been a bias from the game becoming a social thing discussed between the camps? Well, as they try to explicitly avoid that, right? So that's something they did try and do. How much was persistent display of score and the removal of lives and levels and gameplay as distracting features apply to other cognitive training games? So what do you two thoughts on how does this research apply to other game design issues? So you were saying,
Well, I mean, it's just about distraction.
make it easier, isn't it? So is it, yeah. So how does it apply to other games? So you say that it doesn't. You think it's just about distraction is the only thing you'd take from this.
Yeah, and you can use that for other games when you're designing them. And maybe you want some distraction for cognitive load, but like Velocity does that from what I read. It actually adds some distraction to it, increase your cognitive load. But it's always a balance.
Because so your response? Yeah.
Well, I would say that having the score, as you said, it can influence, like with your wife example, for example. And so I think it is better to think about these things as well. Having the score not only by distraction, but maybe as an influence on the game experience in general. Because it could be that it influenced the players as well.
So yeah, I think also the in-back procedure itself, right? So you saw that with 3-back. It was too hard. I was overloaded, right? I cannot do that online, right? So anything more than just the task itself is really overloading me. Most games don't do that to me. Most games don't have me at that level of cognitive load. So the question is, if you're not loaded up all the way, how does this, like, should you include score to stress the person when your cognitive training task isn't stressful enough? How do we, and do we know anything from the study about that? No, we don't.
And actually, it was one of the arguments I had on this paper is that they said that they have 3 problems with current studies, that not enough time, and they investigate only everything included or nothing, and that game can influence these results as well, like this having these motivation things can be influenced by game itself. And actually they solved only one issue with this having different kind of combination of motivation features, but they completely forgot about those other 2.
Yeah.
Like game can influence these things.
Yeah.
And yeah, their game probably maybe not the best example.
Also, yes, so there is an issue here, and the final thing I'll say today before you guys get to leave is that it's the generalization, right? So how generalizable. Sometimes you'll see people will take a game and they'll go, right, so this game is like this, therefore adding scores is going to be bad, right? And it's going, well, maybe it's for your game, right? Games are very, very different, and quality matters significantly, right? And it's one of those tricky things that I think we're still in this field dealing with the fact that people are talking about games as if they're a uniform thing, right? So none of you would kind of criticize the statement that it is possible to learn something from a book. That there are some textbooks which you can learn information from. This wouldn't be an argument. I think I could also say there are some books that you will not learn physics from. Right? If I give you a physics task and I give you a book not about physics, tell you to read the book not about physics, and ask you to do a physics test, I could then say, the book didn't help you learn physics, therefore books are not good at teaching physics. Right? That would not be a good generalization, right? And unfortunately, that's still what happens a bit here, right? You might get a game which isn't designed to teach a particular thing. They then test you after that thing and go, well, look, it didn't help you learn that thing. And it's kind of, well, doesn't mean games aren't useful, it just means the one you picked wasn't useful, right? And if I might even find that if I got one of you guys to write a first year physics textbook, right? If I picked you at random and said, right, you are to write a first year physics textbook. No access to any other resources, write it from your current knowledge. And I give that to a bunch of teenagers and get them then to sit the physics test. Is that book useful for training physics? Probably not. Why? Because it's probably not a very good book. Right? Not that books are bad, right? And we're still trapped in this, the meat, somehow my implementation of the medium, this game, represents games, right? As if the book you wrote about physics represents all books about physics, right? So I think that that's a challenge that we're still having to overcome in the literature as in general, right? So you guys will find this, right? That there is this challenge of how do you deal with someone picking their game and saying, oh look, this game didn't do this, or this game suffered from this, therefore all games shouldn't have scores in it, right? Or all training would have this problem. Okay, so thank you very much, guys. Okay, now, yeah, good discussion. Okay, so for next week we get moved to Monday because they keep bouncing us around. So it's Monday the 1st, I believe, next week. Yes, and time edit. And that will be Miriam and who do I have as the other person? So Miriam, who will come up, and I had Jean-Baptiste. He's not here. Is he? I'm going to check if he's actually doing the course. If he's not doing the course, I will be the opponent for Miriam. Which might be fair because Miriam's doing her PhD, which means she tends to have been doing this stuff a lot longer than the rest of you, and so she'd be pretty mean opponent. She'll pick you apart a bit more than you guys will. So if Baptista doesn't show, I will be the other opponent for next week, and we're doing games for behavioural change the week after. So on Thursday, the 4th, I think it's Thursday the 4th. We're looking at, so I'm grabbing some papers. I've got a couple of example papers, but if those people want to suggest something, if you could suggest it today. So who have I got for there? So Bendik, is it? No, it's yeah. So not Hillestad, but Bendik.
The other Bendik.
Yeah, the other Bendik. We have two Bendiks so far. So yeah. So so have you got a paper you'd like to suggest, or? Okay, I've got some. I'll send you a couple that you can have a look at, and we'll decide that today, this afternoon. It's Mila. Yeah, you. Shall I? Have you got a paper you'd like? Or, yep, I think I've got yours in my spreadsheet. I'll just check. So you sent me that one. Towards gamification of knowledge-based construction. So yeah, I was having a look at it. It's okay, but I might suggest another one. So okay, okay. So we'll see you guys on Monday. Yeah. Yes, well, this class will always be 10 till, well, yes. So I'd asked for it to be moved, and he hadn't got around to moving it. So yeah, I prefer it at 10. I think you guys prefer it at 10. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Okay. Right. Okay. So we'll see you. Yeah. I'll get it changed in time edit. I made the request. It just hasn't happened. So yeah, Monday I think it is 10 o'clock as well. Yeah. Okay.